Hi, I'm Ashley and welcome back to my channel. I have a feeling today's video is going to be a bit of a doozy. I tend to stay away from painted pieces of furniture because stripping paint is super tedious and really messy, and I just avoid it. So let me tell you why I decided to buy this big red dresser. So one might say that I have a little bit of a Facebook Marketplace addiction. I just find myself opening the app and searching and scrolling for a fun new project, even though I have a million that I still need to work on. I saw this one day as I was scrolling by. I was like, oh, it's painted. I'm scrolling by. A few hours later, I was scrolling, found it again, and I was like, oh, the hardware that looks like it's wood hardware because they painted that too. But I was like, no, still painted, scrolling by. Kept doing it until like the fifth time I still saw it and it was still available. And I was like, I'm doing it. There's a sign that Facebook Marketplace keeps showing me that I need to tackle this dresser. So that's what today's video is going to be about, is I'm going to be stripping off this red paint and hopefully, cross your fingers for me. I really want to find walnut veneer underneath this because I can tell that it's not solid wood based on the back of the furniture. You can see it's made of particle board with a layer of something on top of it. Usually it's a veneer, and my hope is that it's a really high quality veneer. So without further ado, let's start stripping this paint. I'm going to be using my favorite stripper. This stuff is great because it works really fast and works really effectively, but it is kind of toxic. So you just have to make sure to wear like rubber gloves, like the latex gloves. It'll eat through that. A mask, even glasses so it doesn't get in your eyes. And then I usually just pour it into like a little container and brush it on. And then to clean up, but I use mineral spirits. Let's start stripping.
Half hour, and I was like, I know. So
So I painted on the stripper and left it on for about 15 minutes, and that's usually all it takes before you can really start to see the paint bubble and lift. It didn't really do it on this top, but where you'll see it on the sides and the drawers upcoming here, but it still came off really easily. I started with the top of this dresser, and right away I could tell something was off. None of the wood finish was coming off with the paint. So something was just not right. I could tell it was plastic. And sure enough, it ended up being laminate. Wah, wah. Not what I was hoping for, but also not super unexpected. Manufacturers put laminate on the top of dressers and nightstands to make them more durable. That way, like if you set down a glass or spill something, it won't leave a water ring or ruin the piece. It definitely has its perks for everyday use, but it wasn't what I was hoping for when I was expecting to uncover some beautiful veneer. Now, the real magic happens once I started moving on to the drawers and sides. Just wait until you see this because it's hands down one of the most satisfying things ever. The paint literally melts off in less than 15 minutes with this stuff. It just slides away like butter. Honestly, this is my favorite part of refinishing furniture, not the stripping of the paint because I usually don't like that, but I love this part because you finally get to see what you're working with underneath all of those years of paint and wear. The sides and drawers ended up being absolutely beautiful veneer wood. You can tell that whoever painted this dresser didn't use a primer because I only see one layer of paint on this, which I'm not mad about because it made stripping everything off so easy. The edges and detailed areas are always the trickiest part when you're using a chemical stripper. I usually do a little trial and error to figure out what's going to work best for the piece I'm working on. First, I tried a medium stiff brush to lift off the extra paint, dipping it in mineral spirits to help clean off any excess stripper as well. That didn't work that well, so I grabbed my carbide scraper and used it to get off any excess paint. That did help remove a lot of that paint. And for those really cornered areas that you cannot get sandpaper in, your carbide scraper, nothing will work. I use a dental pick and just pick out the paint. It's essentially all you're doing. And it does take some time, but it's definitely worth it to make sure all of that red paint is removed. Then I grabbed my Surf Prep sander with 220 grit sandpaper and sanded off everything else. And just a quick tip here, don't go lower than 220 grit sandpaper on veneer because it can eat right through it before you even realize it.
So now that we have everything stripped off, I'm able to tell what material is what. Everything is veneer, mostly. except for the top. The top is laminate. And a lot of times furniture makers will make the top laminate so it protects it because it's super durable, but it's not pretty and it doesn't match the rest of the piece and I can't stain it. So what I'm gonna do, because it's only the top and it's a flat surface, it's gonna be super easy, I hope, to put a new sheet of veneer to match the sides. Now, I think this is walnut wood, but a way to check is using ChatGPT is you can upload a picture of the wood grain, you can upload multiple just so it has a reference point and ask what the wood grain is and it will usually tell you. It'll give you a couple maybe different ones and you're able to narrow down which one it is. This is definitely walnut according to ChatGPT. So I'm gonna order a sheet and it's probably not gonna get here until a couple days. So we'll probably have to put that off while we work on the rest of the dresser. So I'm gonna gently try to use the carbide scraper to remove the finish on the legs and the base. If that doesn't work, then I'm just gonna go straight to my Surf Prep sander that does curves really, really well. Only gently apply pressure as I'm going down, especially on curved surfaces, because sometimes you can get a little bit of bumpage. I don't know what else to call it, but you can get some textured pieces where it's actually taking chunks out of the wood and that's not what you're going for. So just lightly remove that finish so that whenever I go to finish sanding it, it'll be super quick. But you can see the old finish coming off in ribbons here, which is pretty satisfying.
You can see here I'm not putting even pressure on the carbide scraper. It's really just taking off the finish on the right side, but that's totally fine. As long as I'm not digging into the surface of the wood, it still works. These scrapers are super effective, but they do take a little bit of muscle, which is why I don't always grab them first. So a cool thing about carbide scrapers is that the blades last way longer than regular steel ones, like up to 100 times longer. And when the blade finally does get dull, you don't have to toss the whole tool. You can just swap it out with a new blade. A lot of them are even double-sided, so you can flip the blade and keep it going. Honestly, they're super effective for getting through those tough finishes without making a big dusty mess like sanding does. I switched over to my Surf Prep sander for these curved legs and I'm using one of their squish pads. The pads are awesome because they flex and bend with the shape so you can sand curves and details without flattening them out. It makes sanding way easier on pieces like this that a flat pad just wouldn't work, but I'm using the flat pad on anything that's straight. So like straight base, I'm just using a regular pad with sandpaper on it. I have a code for Surf Prep Sander, and I'll link it below. You get 10% off using my code. It is a pricey sander, but oh my gosh, it is one of my all-time favorites. I highly recommend an investing one if you plan to redo a lot of furniture. So before I sanded the dresser itself, I used mineral spirits to clean off that surface to make sure there was no more stripper lift on it. I waited for it to dry and then sanded with 220 grit sandpaper all over, just removing any of that excess paint and just smoothing out the surface. A lot of times I get asked, what do you do after you strip the surface? This is it. I clean up with mineral spirits and then I sand. And then once I'm done with my orbital sander or Surf Prep sander, I clean it off with a tack cloth and then hand sand in the direction of the grain. And that just is going to remove any swirl marks that the orbital sander might have left.
So the veneer has finally come. I just ordered it from Amazon. It comes wrapped up in a sheet like this, almost like wallpaper. That's kind of what it is, honestly. There's a backing to it with just really thin actual wood on the front. So now I'm going to cut it to size with a little bit extra hung over, probably about 1/4 of an inch on all the sides, just to make sure it covers the full top, and then I can trim off the rest with an edger. 38 inches, so we'll make it 38 and a half, 18 and a half. to apply the veneer to the dresser, I'm going to be using contact cement. The next thing that you need is a disposable tray. You can also have a disposable roller tray too. That would actually be better because it's easier to apply the contact cement with a roller. I'm just using a foam roller. And this stuff is pretty smelly though, so make sure you have a mask, ventilated area, and then of course you need your veneer. And I am going to apply a coat to the back of this veneer and to the top of the dresser. Anywhere where I want the veneer to stick is where I'm going to apply the contact cement. It has been 2 years since I applied a large sheet of veneer, so I clearly underestimated the amount of contact cement that I needed. I have to go grab some more. So I ran to the store and got 2 more canisters. They do have like a middle size. They have 3 different sizes. They did not have the middle size at the Home Depot I went to.
I'm applying more contact cement on this veneer to make sure I covered any missed areas because I think I definitely had some around the edges there. And actually, most people recommend you apply 2 coats anyways. So you apply 1 coat of contact cement, wait 15 minutes for it to dry or become tacky, and then apply a second coat, and that just ensures it really, really adheres to the surface. I'm actually only going to apply 1 coat to the dresser top though. I just removed any dust. Want to make sure it's nice and clean of dust before you apply contact cement, just so you can have ultimate adhesion, and then just rolled it on. Waited about 15-20 minutes. It was taking a little longer to dry because it was super humid, especially in my garage that day.
So it's been about 15 minutes and it's dry. So anything without contact cement will not stick to the surface here. So I'm going to be using skewers that I had laying over there so I can keep my surface from my veneer from touching the surface until I want it to, so I can line it up before I apply it, because once it sticks, it's stuck. It's all lined up now, so I'm going to be using a J roller. That's going to be after it's kind of all on, just to really make sure that it adheres. This is going to be what I use first, and it's actually a wallpaper thing, but I also use it to put on drawer liners and everything. So I'm going to take off 1 skewer at a time while I push down on the veneer so no air bubbles get in on it. Okay, now it's on. It's actually pretty easy stuff. Makes you want to like start putting veneer on everything because it's so pretty. I wish I was a little taller, or I had a step stool, because putting your weight behind it helps here too. But I'm just going to kind of roll it across to really make sure that it is stuck. The goal is for it to be as stuck as possible. We don't like when veneer starts peeling, especially around those edges. So we're going to really focus on those. And that is also why you leave a 1/4 inch overhang, so that you have a little bit of wiggle room when you're applying the veneer, and then you're going to go through and trim it off. Now you can do a couple of different things to trim it off. I've done both. There is a router, so you can use a straight edge bit on your router to get it to come off. However, I'm going to keep it for simplicity's sake, so kind of everyone can do this, because I want to show how simple it is to apply a veneer. I'm just going to use a little edge band cutter. I get mine from Amazon. There's a yellow one that you can buy from like Lowe's or Home Depot that is a piece of crap. I don't like it. So I'm going to show you the one that I actually do like, and it works really well. If you come over to the edge, you have to be kind of careful like I just did here. I can kind of hear a little bit of like crinkling. I can't think of another word for it. And until I don't really hear that anymore, I'm going to continue to do this. And I think I'm good to go.
To trim off the excess veneer, I used an edger like I mentioned before. It's pretty easy to use. Just run the blade across the excess veneer, and if it gets a little stuck like it did here, try just going from the other side. Honestly, it's really simple. And then after trimming, I like to hit the edge with a fine sanding block. Usually I just use 220 grit sandpaper to soften it and make it blend seamlessly. And I like to knock off those edges so that it's less likely to peel in the future.
So the final step before staining this is to apply the edging. And I just buy this off of Amazon as well. I got walnut to match the rest of the piece, and I got the right size to cover up these edges here. You can see that I didn't finish getting the stain off, and it's because there are edges here that don't have wood on it originally. So I want to cover all that up to make it seamless and pretty.
Veneer edging has heat activated glue on the backing, so all you need to do is use a household iron. I love this small one because it's really lightweight. I set mine to about medium heat, then line up the edging with the area that I'm covering and slowly run the iron over it, just applying light pressure while I do it. The heat melts the glue and really bonds it to the wood. I like to go over it a couple of times to really make sure it's fully adhered. Then I just trim off the excess with some scissors. It's easy to cut, and then do the same thing as the actual veneer on top and hit it with a sanding block at like a 45-degree angle to really dull those edges and make it nice and seamless.
We have a little bit of a problem. The veneer that I applied, and I knew this when I got it, I put it next to the rest of the dresser, and it is a different color. Those wood experts out there, please tell me if I'm wrong, but this is walnut on the drawers and the rest of the dresser. This is also walnut. I think this is black walnut, and I think this is American walnut. Don't quote me on that. I actually have no idea. But they're different shades. So we're gonna have to use a technique to blend it all so it looks like one cohesive piece and they don't look like two different toned woods.
I'm going to do that by using some staining techniques. The first is applying pre-stain wood conditioner. This will just help ensure an even stain across the board. After letting it sit for about 10 minutes, I wipe off the excess. When I was using the pre-stain, you could really drastically tell the difference between the different wood tones as well. They're both gorgeous tones. They're just very different. One's more red, the top, and what I added is more brown.
So I'm going to be using Minwax's gel stain in walnut. I'm going to use a staining pad to stain it with, especially on the top. I'm not going to let it sit on the top at all practically. I'm just going to wipe it on and immediately wipe it off because it's already darker. And I want the sides and the front drawers to actually be darker and kind of match this. So I'll let it sit for a few minutes before wiping it off on the sides.
It was absolutely downpouring outside, which is why you hear some white noise in the background. Hopefully that doesn't put you to sleep here. But I essentially just wipe it on with this pad. If you haven't used a staining pad before, they're actually really great for all different kinds of stains. But I wipe it on and then I use a lint-free cloth just to go back over it one more time to make sure that there's no extra gel stain left on it. And here on the sides, I am leaving it on there for a lot longer, like I mentioned before. You can see myself doing a little test here to show, and then I was like, oh no, that hasn't sat long enough. So I painted some more back on it and went and removed the drawers while I waited and then wiped off that rest. So you can tell the coloring is still off, which I expected. So after doing all of the drawers in that same walnut gel stain, I grabbed some dark walnut gel stain and applied it just to those sides and drawers that were leaning more orange color. My hopes were to darken the color to match the top and edges from where I added that new veneer. And you can tell that them being side by side here, you can tell that it's actually getting closer. So I was feeling very, very hopeful at this point. But you can tell the coloring is still just not quite right. So I have one final trick left up my sleeve.
So I'm just going to mix up a little bit of homemade toner here using a clear polyacrylic and a water-based formula. And I'm going to mix, I have a water-based stain, and it's dark walnut. So I'm only gonna do a little touch, not a ton. And I use this strainer because I don't know if you caught that, but there was like chunks of poly that has just dried over time. This strainer helps keep it out of your paint sprayer so it doesn't get clogged. The way that I'm gonna add this, so I'm just gonna add like a tablespoon, or that's really a teaspoon. I'm gonna make it less than that. Like that much. That was like half a teaspoon, if that. And hopefully this will do what I need it to.
So something happened here as I was spraying. I don't know if I had oil left in my paint sprayer because I had used it on the cornhole boards that I had just made. And I'm thinking that's what it was and why it wasn't like adhering to the surface. This has never happened before in my life. So I just took a brush and brushed it out and it fixed it, but it was really, really strange. It only did it on that one side too. It didn't do it on the top or the drawer fronts, just that one side. And then I did one final coat of poly on the entire dresser after I just used 220 grit sandpaper to sand out any bumps or lumps or anything and wiping down the dust.
And it's all done. I mean, granted, it is not 100% perfect, but it is pretty darn close. You let me know in the comments if you think it's a pretty good match now. I also lined the drawers with some of my favorite liner. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this makeover. It was pretty drastic from start to finish. And if you just remember what it started with to what it is now, this is what I live for. I love these drastic before and after furniture pieces. And now this one gets to go live a new life somewhere else. I am not going to be keeping this one. I will be selling it, probably listing it for around $500. And I sell locally through Facebook Marketplace. But thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed, and subscribe for more furniture flips like this.